few more weeks.
Yeah.
And it'll be perfect.
Are we cool? We good? We good?
We're probably good to get started. So welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Tech for Good talks. And we're here today to chat about EdTech with you. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Gabby and I'm the Head of Commercial here at FreeStudyQ.
I'm Rich, I'm the MD here at FreeStudyQ.
We're going to tell you a bit more about us in a second, but first thing we just wanted to kind of give you a little run through of what today will involve. So we're going to be chatting a bit about EdTech, obviously, because that's what we're here to talk to you about, and we're going to be running through some examples of people using technology to educate. And then we're going to be hearing about the future, what that looks like from some very special experts of ours. And then we're going to be diving across to our panel, who I mentioned just a moment ago, that will be joining us. And this is a panel of industry experts that we've invited along to join us today. So really excited to be diving into that conversation and hearing more from people that are working within this sector every single day. There will be an opportunity for questions, which you can ask us and the panel. So please do feel free to pop your questions in the chat. You can do that throughout, but we will leave some time at the end for those. So before we get started, a bit about who we are.
A little bit about us, yeah. So we're FreeStudyQ. We're a software agency down in the south coast of England, although we do have people all over the place these days. And we are very mission-led, so everything we do, we want to change millions of people's lives for the better. Because we work in software and we work in technology, we realise the impacts that that can have, and we sort of witness that on a kind of daily basis through the projects that we do with people like the American Red Cross and the World Resources Institute and the UN. And it's really kind of, to us, it's very important that we're responsible with that kind of power that we have in using technology and putting software into so many people's hands. Because technology itself, although it has a great ability to impact the way people live their lives, and always has done throughout kind of human evolution, if you look at all the big step changes that have happened in the way that humans behave, a lot of it comes from as a result of a new technology that's been invented. And that's true of kind of pencils or the printing press or the Industrial Revolution, all the way through digital and mobile phones. But the technology itself is agnostic. It doesn't care how it's used particularly. And you see that if you look at like the world of social media and the impact that that's had on people's lives. There's good stuff and there's bad stuff as well. As I said, we recognise the power that that technology has, so we always try to use it for good wherever we can. And the world of education is, if you're going to impact someone's life positively, then probably educating them is one of the most powerful things you can do. So the world of EdTech is one that really kind of fascinates us here. And we've got a couple of examples of stuff that we've done that we can take you through. And then some other examples of some new kind of use of technology that's out there as well.
Absolutely, and as Rich has just said, so you know why we're here to talk to you about EdTech today, but we couldn't kind of not touch on it without touching on the COVID effect. So, like so many things, COVID has really accelerated what was already inevitable, which was a shift towards a more digital way of educating. So, you know, everyone had to invest in infrastructure over the last year with things like lockdowns, if you can remember those. Hopefully we don't have to do it again. It became absolutely essential to be able to reach people virtually and still educate and deliver really important learning to pupils. So thanks to technology, you know, that relationship between students and teachers could continue virtually without really skipping much of a beat. And actually, even though, you know, it was being delivered to people's homes and lounges and kitchens and wherever it was that you were doing it, it actually still reached them in a meaningful way, which was really, really important. But EdTech doesn't just apply to schools, you know, it's enabling learning, training, and educating. And as, you know, Rich said, that's a really powerful tool. So what we wanted to do was have a look at some of the technologies, some that we've been involved in, and some other examples where technology is really advancing how people can learn.
So probably a really good example of EdTech, and as sort of Gary pointed out, that how it was affected by the COVID effect, is the work we do with Bristol University. So with the University of Bristol, not
yeah,
Bristol
get that
University,
right.
I will get in big trouble saying that. University of Bristol. So the University of Bristol app, it was actually developed, it's not as an educational tool. What the app is there to do is to help to onboard students to the university and help them to feel connected with the university institution itself and other students. So there was a particular problem that the students had identified, that they felt disassociated with the actual university itself.
And this was pre-COVID, right?
This was all pre-COVID. So we developed an application that students could download before they got to the university that helped them prepare for it, and then prepared them in those early couple of months when they're first getting into kind of student life. And as Gabby said, when we first looked at this project, this was back in 2019, which was pre-COVID. We were halfway through the project, well, getting on halfway through, when the lockdown happened, and it hugely accelerated the importance of this application to the university. And when we launched it in September last year, it had a huge uptake from the students, and they were having to onboard people remotely, and when I mean really remotely, like in China. And so we had a big cohort of user base from overseas as well. And it really helped the university to sort of engage with those students and make them feel welcome and make them feel part of the University of Bristol life. So it's a hugely successful one. And that's a really important part of people's education. It's not, although it is obviously all about the learning, it's, you've got to create an environment that's positive for people to learn as well.
Absolutely.
So another example we've got here, this isn't in the sort of academic educational field, but the work we do with the American Red Cross to encourage first aid training. So the first aid app is a companion app that is used by the Red Cross to support their course-based learning. So it's kind of a blended learning tool. And what the app allows people to do is learn at their own pace. So they can do their preparatory work at their own pace on the tube or on the bus or at home or wherever they choose to do it. And that preps them for the course that they go on to take. And then it also tracks the degradation of the knowledge. So first aid training degrades, they give it, after a couple of years, you have to retake the courses in the professional environment. And the app supports you in that process. So you can see kind of the degradation of your understanding, and then you're reminded to go back onto the courses as well. So that's a hugely successful project. We've had the Red Cross, about 7 million people that have downloaded it and kind of use it on a daily basis.
Amazing. Now this is an example of our own. This is an example from Curoscope, and they've developed a kind of new way of taking science to a different dimension, which actually enables you to learn all about the human body, actually on the human body. So basically through augmented reality and like a 3D learning experience, you can explore all types of things, respiratory and digestive systems, with like a fully immersive 3D 360 video. So you can scan your phone across the t-shirt and it takes you like on a real trip inside the body. You can download the app and do like a demo, and I would say it's quite good fun actually. We did it earlier.
It is definitely worth a go, because the way the and this is great for kind of engaging, well, anybody really, but kids particularly seem to find it fascinating. So the idea is that you wear the t-shirt, and then what the app does is it overlays your innards on top of your actual body. So it's kind of gross, which kids kind of love, but it's kind of revolting, and you get to explore your intestines.
Yeah, so a great one inside of the classroom or outside, kind of learning and finding a really engaging visual way of teaching that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so really, it's kind of really interesting, like a virtual autopsy.
Yeah, I love it. Kind of different from when I was at school.
So the example we've got here is actually using AI technology. So there is a platform called GPT-3. So without getting into too much complexity, it's an open AI platform that we've actually been granted access to. And the demo that we've got here is a way of, it's for the UNHCR, who are the UN's refugee organisation. And they need to train border guards as to how to accept refugees into different countries. And a huge part of that training is role play. So role play is a really important facet to it, because during, you guys will know when you're training someone through role play, you get to learn lots of the sort of edge cases that might happen. In a world of COVID, that is a very difficult thing to try to execute, because you can't have that sort of face-to-face interaction to do the same sort of role play. What GPT-3 allows you to do is actually set up, and it uses AI to set up a personality of a potential refugee that can come in. And then you can ask that AI different questions, and it will respond with different answers as well. And then you can see here what you do is, as you go through it, you rate the responses to it to try to decide whether you think there is a risk to the refugee's health or other parts to it. And then using the AI as well, you can decide on those responses whether they are high or low risk, monitor those, and then potentially send them off to a trainee to use. So it's a really, GPT-3 really opens up AI to a more kind of, to a wider audience. It sort of demystifies it a bit. It's an incredibly thing to use.
Yeah, and a super cool way of replicating a real life experience that provides really strong training. So here we've got Sparks, which is a platform that allows personalised learning for Key Stage 3 and GCSE maths. So it uses 130 million bespoke data points to create that personalised learning. And essentially Sparks replicates a classroom environment virtually by providing the student with maths questions, and depending on the answers and how well they're doing in answering those questions, the platform adapts the learning journey for that particular student. So if they need a little bit more in an area, they can go on a different journey, or if they're actually excelling in an area, they don't get provided any more information about that or in a different way. So essentially it's like having a virtual teacher that gives you one-on-one personalised teaching. So a kind of, yeah, really interesting way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They're very, you know, they're very strong on saying they're not there to sort of replace teachers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a kind of really important thing to bear in mind, that actually, you know, maths lessons, yes, it's about learning maths, but there's a whole world of other kind of support teachers give to students that, unfortunately, an AI is just not in a situation to deliver that kind of thing at the moment. Yeah. But it's a really interesting one. In terms of the concept of giving somebody that one-to-one personalised learning experience, which means the student can like learn at their own pace. So yeah, it's a really
and presumably helping teachers identify the students in a large classroom that maybe need a little bit more one-to-one, and also supporting parents in that kind of journey as well. So a really interesting use of technology. Now, we couldn't stand here and talk about EdTech without asking some experts, the kids themselves that have been living through the last year, experiencing lots of different ways of technology being used to provide learning environments for them. So let's give it away to our expert.
And it's kind of good so you can like leave the call. And then like you can like do it like by yourself and not as a teacher, like not what it's good to help students, but it's like a bit annoying to hear them in the background talking and you just can't really concentrate.
Yes, but my mum is just more bad with my teacher.
Not seeing friends and like that's it really.
Robot teachers.
Robot teachers.
Basically, robots like teach us, and like maybe we do Mars, Earth still, and as it blows up.
So my mummy I get to be home all time, and my mummy gets to teach me.
Oh, such a cute way to end. So you had it here first. Robot teachers are the future. So if anybody asks you what you learned today, that is it.
And your kids are going to be at home with you all the time.
I'm not sure how many parents are going to be grateful for that particular bit of information. Now, it is time to get you all introduced to our panel. So we are super excited and grateful that our panel have joined us today, and they are all industry experts working in this sector. So we really wanted to be able to chat further with our panel who knows so much about this, and we've got lots of questions, and we will get everyone introduced to you shortly. At this point, I just wanted to remind everyone joining us at home that you can ask questions, and our panel will hopefully be sticking around to answer those questions as well. So please do pop your questions in the chat, and we will save some time at the end to get those answered. So, hi panel, thank you so much for joining us. It would be great to start off by getting you all introduced to everyone at home. So, not picking favourites, I'm just going to go across my screen, just in case anybody wants to be like, oh, you know, it wasn't first. So, Ryan, you are number one. So, please could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, my name's Ryan Green. I'm the founder of a company called Enterprise. We focus primarily on the primary and secondary education, so and help them with digital communications and kind of digital enablement in learning and operations.
Thank you. Annie, you're next on my screen.
Hi everyone, my name is Anirudh. I'm a researcher at the University of Oxford. I'm part of the Human-Centered Computing Group. I focus on research in the kids space. I work together with various stakeholders such as developers and parents. Basically, my research is about creating a safer space for children.
Amazing. Guy?
Hi Rich, hi Gabby, hi Three-Sided Cube, everyone who's watching, and the fellow panelists. My name's Guy. I'm a consumer technology journalist, so I've edited Stuff magazine, GameSpot UK, CNET UK, and my experience is mainly in consumer technology, so reviewing products, sometimes in the educational tech space from the likes of Sphero, Little Bits, Osmo, Spectrums, those sorts of products. And I now write a video games column for the Metro. I consult with tech and video game firms to help them make their products better, and I do the odd bit of speaking, such as this.
Amazing. Emily?
Hi everyone. I wish I could pretend that I'm an industry specialist, but I am admittedly a university student. So I am at the University of Durham, along with Meg, who will introduce herself in a second. I'm studying economics and politics, and I was sort of introduced to Three-Sided Cube via the society that I run at Durham, which is the Durham University Charity Fashion Show. And I'm looking into going into a career in consulting post-university, as this is my final year. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to give a good insight on what it's been like online learning this year. But yeah, as far as industry specialists go, not quite me.
Definitely. So I'm giving you that title. David?
Hi everybody, yeah, I'm David Moynihan. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Teddy London. So Teddy London's a new university. We've just been registered with the OFS. We're due to open in September this year, and we're specialists in design engineering, so specifically trying to do one thing and do it well. And I think one of the things that maybe I can talk a little bit about today is how we're building the technology from the ground up. So we're, having a greenfield site for technology starting from scratch is like the holy grail when you're a technologist, really. So, I'm happy to be here. It's lovely to meet everybody. I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Amazing. And last but not least, Meg.
Hi everyone, thank you so much again for having me here today. I can only really echo what Emily has just said. So I've been affected by COVID now at university for almost over an entire year actually by now. And so hopefully I can just kind of provide some insight as to how it's affected me. And I'm currently studying English, philosophy, politics, and history of art. So none of that is entirely tech related, but hopefully, as I said, I'll be able to kind of shine some light on what it's been like from my position.
Amazing. Well, it's amazing to have such a diverse panel covering so many different areas and having such different insights, which is what we love. I think something that we wanted to kind of spend some time looking at was also around the challenges. We've run through some of the technologies that are out there and that are available, and they're not necessarily new, I would say. We talked a bit around COVID accelerating the need, but we're also aware that there's quite a few barriers for organisations kind of adopting this new technology, and considering You're all in the space, and obviously, Meg and Emily, it'd be great to hear the kind of challenges you've experienced maybe using some of this technology as well. Ryan, I know you consult with a lot of these sort of schools and academies, and actually, you know, what are the challenges you've come across that are really the barriers to getting technology into these spaces?
I think it's predominantly like it's aptitude within inside the organisation. So, you know, I grew up around technology. I grew up around computers. You know, it's second nature for me to find a problem and then find a piece of software to fix the problem. I think culturally, certainly primary and secondary education, they don't look to software to fix the problem. They look to people to fix the problem. So a big thing around it's culture. As you mentioned, the COVID scenario accelerated. I mean, I was having conversations last November, December, where I would get in a car and I would drive like 200 miles for a 30-minute meeting in a primary school because that's how they facilitated it. To then, you know, thinking this is mental, we should all get on a Google Meet or a Teams meeting, but couldn't get them to adopt it. And then, you know, come March, everybody became a Teams, Zoom, Google Meet kind of expert overnight. So I think part of it was, you know, well, the big part of technology adoption in primary and secondary education is culturally inside the organizations. They don't look to technology to fix problems, they look to people. And that's probably the biggest insight that we've known for a while, that is now changed and hopefully will perpetuate outside of, you know, when lockdown measures kind of finish.
It's really interesting in terms of that culture change, and also probably the confidence, the skills, like you say, of knowing how to use that and adopt it and knowing what it's going to deliver. David, that makes me think of Teddy London, as you said, you know, you're starting from the ground up. There's no culture to change, I guess, in terms of that respect. Kind of what was your viewpoint? Why was Teddy needed? What were the challenges you were trying to resolve?
Well, I think engineering is a very physical discipline anyway. And so I think the original vision for Teddy was that it would be very much an on-campus experience. And I think what COVID's actually done internally within the organisation is to change that conversation, really. So if people can't be physically present at the campus for various reasons, COVID or otherwise, then how do we ensure that people get a good learning experience? You know, so we're actually developing our education offer around that model, really. So it's synchronous and asynchronous, so students can participate whether they're on campus or not, and that the online learning materials that they get to engage with are designed to grab their attention and to challenge them as well. So not just sort of videos of a talking head of a lecture or something like that. I think, you know, and I think this is one of the challenges that a lot of universities have had this year, is trying to use that, what's a traditional on-campus based method of delivery, and translate that into something that's engaging online. Because those lectures online aren't very engaging. You talk to students, they don't really like them. You know, they'd rather just read the transcript of it rather than look at the person talking. And it's not really a great way to learn, I think. So I think there's a lot of learning, and we've been able to take advantage of that being new, and trying to bring our academics with us, you know, so the academics to say to them, that actually, if we're going to be looking at a fully blended model of learning that works online and offline for all of our students, what is it that you need to equip yourselves to be able to do that well with the technology? And just listening to what Ryan was saying there, a lot of the challenges I think institutions have is the mindset of the people that work in the institution. And I think COVID has really accelerated that, because people have had to try to push themselves to understand how to do things differently. And it has changed that conversation, I think. And I do think that education is not going to be the same going forward, certainly for higher education. I think it does really change things. And I'll be really interested in the thoughts of Emily and Meg and their experiences this year, really, because, you know, for me, that's the value. I want to be able to listen to what that's been like. How does it feel to be doing your work on your own, you know, in that way, and what could be done better? What are the ways that you think could you know, enable you to get a better experience of that? Because you pay quite a lot of money to go to university, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I can see lots of nodding heads from Emily and Meg during exactly that chat. So I guess, you know, David's done my job for me. Emily, Meg, what was it like? What are your kind of thoughts?
Well, I think it's quite interesting what you said, David, around sort of making things engaging for the students. And that actually, whilst I think a lot of students at the thought of online learning at the beginning of the year, sort of back to last September, were like, oh, fantastic. I don't have to walk to my lectures anymore. I can do lectures from my bed at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's great. Whereas fast forward a year, I think people's mentality have completely changed, and actually they're missing going to those lectures, and they'd much rather get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and actually walk halfway across campus. And I think it is because, you know, universities, they had to adapt so quickly, and because that change of culture wasn't something that had been embedded beforehand, they weren't able to adapt to make something that was engaging. So I think some subjects, I can only speak for my own when I say this, is that, you know, some others had live lectures, for example, which I think even having a live lecture where someone's actually sort of sat like this on a Zoom, even that helps slightly. Whereas all of mine were just pre-recorded lectures of someone literally just talking at a screen for an hour. And I found them to be really disengaging. I felt like they were trying to get too much information across in the space that they had. I felt like, you know, they were going way beyond the time that they normally do. And so I think sort of it only took a couple of weeks for people to lose that engagement. So I definitely think more needs to be done in terms of how can universities make that blended experience worthwhile and purposeful. But I do also appreciate that to have them to do that so quickly was never, you know, that's going to be so difficult. You kind of need something like coronavirus to sort of get that change going. Meg, I don't know whether you felt the same.
I think it's a really interesting one, because in many ways, I think, as you know, kind of a sentiment has already been conveyed in this conversation, coronavirus kind of sharpened or acted as like a catalyst for the inevitable, in the sense that, you know, we streamlined quite a lot of the teaching kind of methods and made them more effective and more efficient. You know, even having kind of one-on-one like supervisions with your teachers actually sometimes worked out better being online, because you knew you were going to have your full time slot, and it was kind of less faff to have to organize physically meeting up with somebody and balancing your time. And it, you know, in many ways it has been a very effective and efficient method to improve your time management. But the thing that bothers me the most about it is just how it heightens kind of the sense of disparity, or kind of like, you know, social inequalities that are already existing amongst students, and how you have to be very proactive in seeking additional help. For example, if you struggle, whether that be with like mental health issues or financially, and having to kind of have this additional barrier between yourself and the institution, whereby they're expecting everyone to react in the same way to something like to a global pandemic, it just, to me, seems quite bizarre. And I found that I've seen a real change and shift in tone in students just feeling almost quite like silenced or just unheard by the university, especially those who struggle in various ways. And so, yeah, I think that's something that they really need to become more mindful of, despite the things that they've, you know, streamlined and become better at and more efficient with. That's what I would add to that.
It's a really interesting point, and I think it kind of links to some of the stuff we were saying during the case studies when we were showing things, that there's kind of always a role for that face-to-face. And I think the issue with, obviously, the pandemic, you know, meant that everything had to stop. So we're not talking about kind of providing some of just the streamlining of services and kind of bringing of technology and using the good bits. It kind of was really tough because it stopped every element of social interaction and human interaction.
And I think, to be honest, that's
right.
not just an educational wide thing. I think, you know, the world of business has seen exactly the same kind of thing, where, you know, yes, some of it is more efficient and it is easier to open your laptop and start talking to somebody, but whilst you're opening your laptop and talking to somebody over a screen, you lose all of that non-verbal communication and all of the kind of, a lot of empathy feels like it goes out the window as well, which I think probably, you know, and learning that's a large part of it.
Absolutely.
I think there's a big, just on that point, there's a big piece that came through in primary education and secondary, which is around the pastoral care. That, you know, you mentioned that AI can't do that, and that's a big element of teaching in today's society. And that is very difficult to do through a computer screen. That tangibility, that tactileness, you know, the empathy, all of that lot. And I think, you know, that is you know, one of the big challenges about, if we're moving to remote education, if we're doing online learning, if we're doing all of this, how does all of that get supplemented? In what format does that look like? Because with that is hugely and Annie, I'm sure you can back me up on this, that's hugely important about the emotional well-being of a child to actually help them progress and develop.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, we're actually on the other side of things because we're teaching certain modules. One of them is, for example, interaction design. I mean, we don't teach to elementary or secondary school, but it's higher education, but still, it's a very practical course where students have to, they're putting like sticky notes on the whiteboard. They're like actively brainstorming, for example. And suddenly this year, for the first time, we had to teach that remotely. And we have students from literally like all across the world. Like we had students from like multiple time zones, like people in Asia, and then there were also people like on the west coast of the US, for example. So there was like a 6-7 hour time difference between some of the students. And even though we're part of the computer science department, we're supposed to be like on the cutting edge of technology, we still had a lot of technological challenges because unfortunately for us, there's no single technology, no single app which solves all of the teaching problems. And we ended up needing like 5 or even 6 different technologies which we needed to use just to teach that single module. And it's fine for us because we're the ones setting everything up, so we know exactly what's happening where. But for the students, it's a lot more complex because like every time we switch from lecture or we switch assignment, it's like, okay, now we need to make use of this app, or now you need to make use of something else. So these are some of the challenges we've also faced from the teaching side of things. And additionally, I think Meg and Ryan both pointed to some very important things. And one of them being something called the digital divide, where maybe not everyone has access to the same resources. Technology can be quite expensive. Even some basic human rights, such as privacy, can be quite expensive as well, especially if you're making use of companies like Google or Facebook. And it's very true that, as a school, as a teacher, you have a responsibility for these children and you need to take care of them. And some of the students might not be able to afford a laptop, and they might not be able to afford maybe counseling or some other important like mental health services. And these are all challenges which need to be addressed. And unfortunately, an AI or an app cannot address these problems by themselves. And there's always that need for like a human element to it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. You had examples, certainly during the first lockdown, where like families are driving to McDonald's to use their free Wi-Fi just so that the kids could get on and actually, you kind of think that's not right? If you need an internet connection to be educated, then that becomes like a human right almost. It's interesting as well the rush that happened because of the pandemic to go to remote working. Remote learning. In that kind of environment, you get a lot of stuff that's created and done on the fly, and there are good decisions made, and there's probably not so good decisions made. So I kind of feel like there needs to be a bit of a period of reflection on it to really understand the impact of everything that's kind of happened over the last kind of year. Because it's interesting, one of actually the barriers that when we deal with a few red brick universities, and to be honest, the big challenge we always have when we're trying to implement any new technology is all of their legacy technology. It's just a morass of different platforms and systems that have been implemented over the last 50 years or whatever. So it's just, and then chucking all of this on top of that as well, kind of feels like they might need a bit of time to breathe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to pick up on something that Anirudh and Meg have both mentioned, and I think probably have more first-hand experience with, this idea of a digital divide or social inequality. It's only really now just becoming apparent. So there's a lot of positives from this period. I think the government's done a reasonable job of getting laptops out there. I think it's about 700,000, although the targets were 1.3 million. But the real issue that's making waves at the moment, at least from what I'm reading, is the fact that children who have special educational needs, they're really struggling to cope. That's 15% of pupils. So while you do get kids and parents who are great with tech and can pick it up and use it and have access to it, there are a lot out there that just, for whatever reason, whether it's educational needs or access to funding, then it's not helping them. And so you've got these kids being failed, and apparently there's 200,000 kids who are about to enter secondary school who are really suffering from literacy problems. So this is sort of a rocket that's just been fired up the bottoms of the government just now. But I have a feeling that more and more of these sort of horrible statistics are going to come out in the next few months.
Yeah, worrying times in a way, isn't it? But as you say, without that access to that knowledge, you can't kind of start to solve the problem. So hopefully, with that sort of information, some good can be done. I'm super conscious that I'm getting some cool questions coming through, so I might just start diving into some of the questions that are coming from people joining us, and get you guys thoughts on some of those. So we've got one here actually, which responds to some of the topics that we've been talking about just now. And it's actually, can remote learning have a positive impact on children's mental health and overall well-being? So we've kind of mentioned the negative impact, kind of flipping it, and actually, is there a positive? So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts. Maybe we should start with Meg and Emily, as they've been living through it. Is there anything that you found was quite positive from like a mental health and well-being sort of perspective?
Emily, shall I jump in, or do you want to jump in?
You can go first.
I think it's a good question, because obviously you can't it would be foolish to kind of be overly reductive and say that it's all negative or it's all positive. But I definitely still would say that it is negative. I think in some ways it can be quite good for people who might be like introverted, for example. It might be quite nice to, not have to deal with big, like large crowds, or finding social situations like quite overwhelming. Sometimes I think I personally have found it quite reassuring that I have a screen to kind of, literally act as a physical barrier between myself and others. It means you can kind of be more forthright and open. But I mean, it also goes the other way, right? I think sometimes as well, you feel like you have a bit of a spotlight on you, especially in situations like this, which is how we conduct our group kind of discussions and things like that. You feel like you're almost being more scrutinized than ever, arguably. And I think it's good that there's, institutions offer for people who need it, the, opportunity to turn off your cameras if that makes you feel uncomfortable. And I know that the university our university, Durham, have done some great things to make students feel more comfortable in those spaces if they need to be made to feel more comfortable, whether that's because of learning difficulties or mental health problems. But I would say on the whole, it is a largely negative thing, because even when we go to the university, we're not allowed to speak to our university library, we're not allowed to speak to our fellow students. I'm not allowed to discuss what I'm learning really with anybody, especially not, indoors. And that's been really tricky. And I felt like my studies have suffered for it as well. Emily, do you have anything positive that you would say?
No, unfortunately, that's why I was kind of paused before I was going to turn my mic on earlier, because I was trying to think, oh gosh, I don't want to seem like some massive Debbie Downer about it. But in all honesty, I just want to echo what Meg said. I think a lot of people's university experience, from both like a social and a learning perspective, is all done just by being with other people. Even just sometimes like sitting in a lecture hall with others, and I'm a little bit confused about something, you can turn around and say, what's that they're talking about, or can you talk me through that when we leave? And I think people feel a lot more comfortable, or at least I know I speak for myself when I say this, sort of when I'm in a sort of a classroom situation for seminars and tutors, when you're doing smaller group stuff, I feel like people can actually have really meaningful discussions, whereas I feel like over a computer, because you've just got that barrier, I feel like I do feel sorry for the tutors, because they're having to pick on people. They're going, right, can you talk? Do you mind turning your camera on? And someone will sort of give a fairly half-hearted answer and then turn it off, and that will be them done. Whereas I think when you're in that group setting, there's that sort of motivation, that incentive, just by being with other people, that sort of makes you want to engage and makes you want to sort of learn from others. And I think that obviously has a huge impact on mental health, as I said, both from an education and a social standpoint. Again, as Meg said, I know that for some of my friends, they've much preferred being able to be over a laptop because maybe they are just more of an introvert. So as I said, I think it will be different for different people, but I think on the whole, I'd say, unfortunately, from a university standpoint, it's been mainly negative. So yeah.
It's really interesting. I think the personality element has a huge part in how people cope with all of this. But also, and this might be for Ryan or Annie, but like, actually, does it also have an impact depending on what type of education we're talking about? So is there a difference when you're talking about like primary level versus kind of Meg and Emily, who are talking about that kind of university study level?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the context that you're using the technology. So if you take, things that were happening during the lockdown in the primary sector, you had people like David Walliams like reading stories to kids in primary schools. That accessibility to individuals who logistically couldn't necessarily make it to a school because of the complexities of the logistics. Now those barriers are instantly removed, and actually, if they were working with a trust, it could not be just one child, it could be 3,000 children in a Awana. And imagine that, that level of interaction, that personal interaction, that becomes almost this whole new experience. We were doing stuff with careers in secondary schools where, again, because we couldn't physically get businesses to talk to students about what it was like working in their organizations, we were doing them over Teams calls. And again, it's a level of interaction of people outside of, let's say, the school per se, that then can now bring an involvement and can support the school in its educational outcomes. So actually, while I feel, yes, maybe internally it's not as, and agree with Meg and Emily, you might lose that level of student interaction, that personability, that contact time, but actually there's now a way for other people that transcend the school gates, certainly in primary and secondary, that now are able to actually have a lot more involvement in the delivery of education, to support it, show their expertise, inspire young people, get them excited about learning and delivery in science. Imagine having Brian Cox teach you your physics lesson, right? Like, how cool would that be? This is all now a possibility, which it never was before. And the possibility was not that the technology was there, but culturally they hadn't accepted it. Now it's been forced on by COVID. They've got to take it on, and they can see the prospects for the future if used well.
Amazing. No, Annie's going to say something.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's also one of the points I had noted down, that the accessibility to education is very important, because that's always been one of the positives of having EdTech out there, is that suddenly world-class education has become accessible to people who otherwise could not access it, even in third world countries, for example. So that's indeed one point. And the other point is also that we have now kind of shown that it sort of is possible, because education in general can be quite slow moving, especially in, for example, secondary school, because teachers could be reluctant to adopt new technologies. And now we have shown, okay, you know what, actually it is possible, like we can implement new technologies. And so in the future, we might see that teachers, more easily, make use of apps which could really help students with learning, for example. And lastly, personally, I've actually been traveling a bit this year. So not having to be in the office, I've managed to a little bit like go around Europe and America. So that's a minor positive there as well.
Amazing. I've got another great question that might be one for Guy. Over the past year, schools have reacted quickly to technology gaps, but it's not a robust strategy. How do you think this will influence government funding in EdTech going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sorry, I don't know who that was from, but thank you for that. Yeah, in terms of, I think I mentioned already, the government hasn't quite met its targets in terms of providing the number of laptops that it wants to for schools. I think it sort of feeds into your earlier question, Gabby. I think that overall, there's a lot to be sort of negative about, and a lot of people are getting left behind. But if you look at the way that the tech industry, which is what I cover, has moved in the last year, I mean, we all know about the growth of companies like Zoom, Microsoft, and Tesla. Tech has really consolidated its position, even more in lockdown. And the fact that kids have now got access to this technology, and laptops and tablets are now part of the classroom, albeit virtually, that's been accelerated years in the last year. Before they were, as far as I understood, they were being used at boarding schools, but now they're, a legitimate part of a lot of schools. And I think, at the moment, 10% of all jobs out there are in tech. Specialized tech roles are particularly in demand, so salaries are up massively for things like specialist networking skills. So for those kids and families that are able to take advantage of this particular moment, there's so much opportunity out there. We went from 600 to 1,000 startups in ed tech last year as well. I think the interesting thing for every one of these, there's a sort of a positive and a negative. So I think, the other side of it, financial literacy is up in general. I was listening to a Financial Times podcast about a kid who'd gotten interested in trading, and that's a bad thing because there's a lot of stuff that's been going on with GameStop and day trading, which is bad. But I think that the kids are getting turned on to more realistic financial education, and also just being interested in it, and that can serve them really well. I thought it was really interesting as well that there's a lot that's been said about how kids are becoming even more addicted to their devices, and sort of spending time on social media or playing video games like Fortnite until 4 a.m, and then when they're going back into classrooms, they're falling asleep at their desk, and their concentration has been affected by that. But again, on the flip side, there's a boarding school called Millfield, which is known for producing sporting stars. They've now started recognizing things like esports, and they're hoping to produce future esports stars. So in general, I would say that the tech industry has really accelerated, and has really taken advantage of this particular moment in time.
It's really interesting because it kind of feeds into another question we had from our viewers at home. Based on your experience, at what academic level has remote learning really worked well during COVID? And what subjects have worked best? So it's quite interesting from off the back of what Guy was saying in terms of actually subjects looking at how they can best use technology to teach really useful skills. David, this might be one for you because I think sounds very Teddy London, but you might have some thoughts on what subjects work best around that area.
Well, I think the subject is a factor, but it's not probably for me the overriding factor. And I think it's about ensuring you get your delivery right, and that the materials are engaging, and that the access to the technology is engaging for students, really. So really it's about the user experience. And I think there's something like engineering where you would, in lots of cases want people to be in the lab or in the makerspace as a physical hands-on component to a lot of engineering education. I know that some colleagues around the world have been doing some experimentation with doing that on VR, for example. So you create a VR lab that people can participate in and do it that way. And actually, I think it comes back to another answer that sort of Ryan and Annie were talking about, really, which is scalability. And I think one of the things that tech can offer is the ability to scale to places that you probably wouldn't be able to get to physically, or wouldn't be able to participate if it was a physical experience. So our experience at Teddy London last summer, we ran a 6-week summer school. Now, if we were to run a physical experience with that summer school, the year before, we only had 30 students, because students have to pay, they fly into the UK in lots of cases to come and participate in this summer school learning experience. And we was able to offer that last year to 148 students from 23 countries. And we ran it across 3 time zones. And the feedback we got was marvellous. The students had a wonderful learning experience, a collaborative learning experience with real meaningful outcomes for them. But if we were just purely constrained by the physicality of our campus, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So I think it can work well, and I think it can work well in all sectors. I think the question is, which sector has it worked best in, primary, secondary, or higher? I think you'd find a mixed picture. And I think that the real things that would make the difference would be how engaging has the experience been for people. And I think colleagues at higher education level will probably miss the social experience more than maybe some younger children. Although my own young children, who are primary school age, really haven't enjoyed it. They've not enjoyed being at home. and they've missed their friends. So I think that again translates to probably all levels of education. There is something about the social mix of human beings being in a space with each other that cannot at the moment be replicated online. But I do think some of the benefits are there. I think scalability for me is one of them, and that access and participation thing, you can actually make your offer more accessible to more people in lots of ways by using technology.
Absolutely. I think some really interesting points there, and some quite positive things maybe to wrap this up on, I think, in terms of being able to look forward and see actually there are some positives that we can take forward with all of this, and hopefully the last year has been worthwhile in some ways to learn from, in some capacity, some good bits and bad bits. But thank you so much for all joining, and thank you to everyone at home for those questions and helping us kind of get all of this good stuff out of our wonderful panel. But thank you so much for all joining us and sharing your insights and knowledge with us all today. It's much appreciated. So the last thing from us before we all let you get back to your sunny Tuesdays and whatever wonderful plans that you have for the evening, we just wanted to mention that our next Tech for Good talk will be on the 25th of May at 3 p.m. and that's going to be on ethical fashion, where we'll be looking at lots of different things around fashion and all of the ethical considerations around that, including sustainability and supply chain. So do catch us for that. And thank you again for all joining us. It has been a pleasure to chat to everyone today and explore EdTech a bit more. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.